Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we have another electronic upgrade video. This one's pretty straightforward, but I figured I'd make a video just in case someone was curious and wanted a little help. So this is a BLI QSI Paragon Platinum, I swear, Platinum 9, I can't say that word. Anyways, engine. So this is a Pennsylvania Road K4, if you guys can tell. I really like this engine. The reason I got it was because it's number 3751, which I thought was pretty ironic because I also model Santa Fe, and you guys, I'm sure you guys know about Santa Fe's famous 3751 class, and so I thought it was pretty cool to own this engine. But yeah, so this is part of their old Platinum line, which was an upgraded line that I think they only had like one or two engines from. And what this meant was that this engine, well, first of all, it's more detailed than the other engines. As you can see, most of this piping is all separately applied. There's only very little molded on detail, such as the molded on dynamo plumbing. And later, when they converted to Paragon 2, it was just part of the standard Paragon 2 line. But anyways, this one has always been a little bit higher quality than the rest of their engines. And you can tell because the engine is fully die-cast, including, actually, I believe the cab. Yeah, the cab is also metal. Everything is die-cast here. Even the tender shell is die-cast. And this is usually a feature you only see on like MTH engines. If you guys didn't know, I think all MTH Steam engines are all die-cast. Tender shell, tender chassis, engine shell, engine chassis, everything is die-cast. And this is one of the few BLI engines that also have this. So it's extremely heavy. This is also the days before they added smoke units into their engines. So I do believe that this entire inside here is filled just with metal, which makes this engine extremely heavy. Again, heavier than other BLI diecast engines because they take up so much space inside the boiler with a smoke unit. The smoke unit removes a lot of potential weight or space for weight inside engines. And so as a result, this engine is extremely heavy. I'd say it's about like 2.5 pounds. It's extremely heavy. And it even comes with an optional traction tire wheel. Remember those old days when BLI actually included the option to have a non-traction tire wheel? Well, yeah, this one gave you a separate wheel if you wanted to add traction tires. I don't think there's a need to add traction tires, though. This engine is extremely heavy, as I said. If you guys can tell from the previous clip, though, this engine has two main issues. So, in terms of electronics, there's also some issues with the actual detail. It's missing the ladder and the tender, and there's one part in the front here. This front piston cover here is actually 3D printed. It's kind of hard to tell, but it's black. But yeah, that part I might try to do a little repair on, but it looks a little weird. It is 3D printed. The original owner somehow broke it off, and so he replaced it with a 3D printed part. But anyways, so this engine has two major issues. One is the sound system sounds horrendous. It is QSI, and there are good sounding QSI engines, especially their ET sound system. But this is their cheap, like factory installed decoder kind of sound decoder, and it just sounds so inferior, especially compared to modern sound systems. Again, I know QSI has made some really good sounds, but for some reason, the decoders that they provided to engine manufacturers to put in their decoders from the factory, those are just really bad. And so the BLI ones in particular sound terrible. If you didn't hear the bell and the whistle, I just cringe when I hear the bell. It is, I just hate it so much. Anyways, it is personal preference, but I don't like the QSI sound system. So I will be replacing that. The second thing was the headlight was extremely dim. It almost looked like it was off, but it was actually on. It was just extremely dim. I believe it is a bulb inside there. The tender rear light I didn't show in the video, but it's actually rather bright, so I might keep it the way it is if it's not if it's not a bulb. If it's a bulb, I'll probably replace it, but the headlight I definitely want to replace because it is way too dim. I'll be replacing it with some of these really small SMD LEDs. These are a nice warm yellow glow, so I like those a lot. And in terms of the decoder itself, I will be replacing it with this TCS WOWsound decoder. So this is a TCS WOW121. I believe it's part number 1525, which is their Steam sounds. And yeah, so I will be hardwiring this. This decoder inside the tender is also hardwired. There's no it's not like there's no NMRA plug. There's no 8-pin plug, 9-pin plug, 21-pin plug, none of that stuff. So it will be a hardwire install. I'll basically be cutting the wire. There's 6 wires that go from the engine tender, and I'll be just cutting those wires and basically soldering them one by one onto this thing. Heads up, so just a heads up, so these old QSI engines are actually really easy to replace the decoders with because there's only 6 wires. That is 6 wires from the engine to tender. So that is 2 wires from the motor, 2 wires for pickup, and 2 wires for the headlight. There was no other lights, there's no sound system, no smoke unit, no chuff sensor, which is what they added in their Paragon 2 and onwards engines. Those engines you have to be a lot more careful because there's like 7 wires, 8 wires, even 9 wires I've seen, I think, on certain engines. And that is because they added a chuff cam, they added the smoke unit, which requires this whole set of things by itself. It has multiple lights like marker lights and cab lights and whatnot. These old QSI ones are really simple to do. They're just one cab, one headlight, or 2 wires for the headlight, 2 wires for motor, 2 wires for pickup. So very straightforward stuff. And yeah, so without further ado, let's take this thing apart and get started with the upgrades. All right, so we'll start with the engine. And to take the engine apart, you just have to remove this one screw inside below the trailing truck here, or leading truck, sorry. And then on the rear here, there was just a screw here and a screw on that side we can remove. Just 3 screws. Very simple stuff. Unlike a lot of other manufacturers like MTH or Pro 2000, these engines are really easy to take apart. Usually just 3 screws. And so with these screws out on the side, I'm going to lay them out. So that's the front one, and then these 2 are the rear ones. We could see the inside. And the inside's honestly built really, really well. So you can see the big, fat, old 5-pole can motor with flywheel and the gearbox. No such, sensors or anything like that for the chuff sensors or anything like that. Makes it easier. Big fat weight in the back here with some plugs to make the replacement of broken wires very interchangeable. In the front here, looks very simple stuff. Not too much going on here. And if we take a look at the actual shell itself, so this is, as I said, all die cast. You can see that very thick, chunky weight down here. Again, the Paragon 2 and afterwards engines, this would be replaced with a smoke unit. So these old ones are just really heavy, which is crazy. Also, you can see the excellent design. There's no wires between the engine, the shell, and the tender, and the chassis here. There's no like wires you have to unplug or can potentially break off. In fact, there's just some springs with contacts that touch the top here. And so basically, when you take the engine shell off, there's no wires you got to disconnect. You could just simply remove the shell, and these contacts will just disengage, which is super smart. You also just be careful with some of these things. So the train control box and some of these front steps here, you got to make sure that they don't break off when you take the shell off. I don't know where oh, here it is. You just want to make sure that these don't break off. So you just want to unplug them before you take the shell off. But yeah, so now that we're exposed to the insides, we could put this guy aside, and we'll focus on this guy here. So we're going to be removing all the stuff here and trying to get to the headlight so we can replace with one of these guys. So yeah. Okay, so I actually just removed the front here, and you can see that this, again, just really smart design, very easy to replace things, very interchangeable. So there's just a plug that's easily accessible from the front. I unplugged it. It's still nice to take the engine apart because I can show you the insides, and also I can figure out which wires, which of the 6 wires go where. But that being said, I guess it wasn't super necessary trying to take the shell apart. That being said, though, it's still useful, and it's easier to work with just one piece instead of having to hold the engine around. But as I said, I just unplugged this front plug here, and then I just slowly wiggled this headlight piece out using a screwdriver to gently pry it out. And we can actually just remove it right now. If I just put my camera down sort of like that. Just use my hand, and the headlight piece comes right out, and you can see here's the bulb, the old bulb, which we can just sort of fish back. Oops, my phone. We could just kind of fish through that hole and come it out just like that. So now we're just gonna replace this with an LED. All right, I got the headlight reinstalled and the engine replaced, everything put back together. You can see there's a little red wire coming out of the back. I'm going to be painting that black later, but for now I'm just going to leave it as is. I haven't gotten really to test to see that the LED actually works yet, so yeah. I took it apart the tender too. As you can see here, it's really nice and compact. 2 speakers and a really nice clean wiring done by BLI. Interestingly, as I said, the tender light was actually quite bright, and it was weird because it was so much dimmer, or so much brighter than the headlight, which was super duper dim. And yeah, it turns out there's an LED in there. So it's weird that BLI chose to put an incandescent bulb for the headlight and an LED for the rear light. For reference, here's the incandescent bulb. It's tiny and very dim. So that's really interesting, but that means that I don't need to be replacing this guy. I'll leave it as is. But yeah, so let's get to replacing all this stuff. So I'll be ripping out the decoder. Probably going to be cutting the wires around here. And yeah, we'll see how that goes. So I'll be right back. All right, so I have the tender prepared for the final soldering. So I have everything besides the actual decoder soldered. So on the LED here, I desoldered all the wires I didn't need, and I added a 1K resistor there with 2 wires. For the speakers, I desoldered some of the original wires because the original wires they used was really stiff for some reason, so I replaced it with some of my own wire. I use this brand wire. It's actually really good. It's really high quality, very flexible, not too stiff, and then the insulation is also very heat resistant, so it doesn't melt. Really high quality wire. I really like this stuff. But I replaced it with some of this wire. And then I also have the pickups from the tender, which originally plugged into the decoder directly. I have them just soldered directly to the 6-pin plug here. So I have basically the right rail soldered to the engine right rail pin, and then the left rail soldered to the left rail engine pin. So this way I don't have to solder 2 right rail wires, one from the engine, one from the tender, into the tiny little plugs here. So yeah, that simplifies the operation. So basically I just have these 6 wires, those 2 wires, and those 2 wires. I have to solder them to 21 pins. Now you can't solder directly to these 21 pins because these are female pins. So actually what I do is, this is, you could buy these like 2 times 11, or I guess 2 times 12 usually, PCB, like generic, male pin headers. And this size will just fit directly into those holes. Now you'll see that I actually removed a whole bunch of those pins. I only kept the ones that I needed. So I removed a bunch of the pins I didn't need. I only kept the, what is this, like the 10 or so pins that I actually use. And basically I could just plug this thing directly in, like so. Doing this one hand really sucks, but I'm not going to push it down all the way, but you get the idea. Basically, I could just push this, this male pin socket down, and then I could just solder each wire to those little tiny pins. Got to be very careful to not have any wires accidentally, touch the other pins. That'd be very, very bad. It is kind of hard to, it's kind of difficult to do. That's the reason why most people use decoder buddies, but I have enough experience in soldering that I feel confident in not shorting anything out. And, in my past, like, I'd say 10 or so 21 pin hardwired installs, I haven't shorted a decoder out quite yet. I'm sure it will happen one day, and I'll regret it then, but for now I'm doing pretty fine. Again, I will only do this if you're very confident in your soldering skills, but you can just solder wires directly to each of these pins, and this allows it so if the decoder burns out for whatever reason, I could just unplug this pin, this male pin socket, and then I could just replace it with another decoder. I don't have to desolder anything when replacing a decoder or exchanging a decoder or whatever I'm doing. Maybe TCS releases a new version that has much better sound or whatever, then I could just unplug it and then plug the new pin, the same pin back into the new decoder. So anyways, yeah, I'm gonna do that, and once I'm finished, that should be the engine complete. I'm gonna reassemble it, and then I'll probably show you how the engine runs afterwards. So yeah, I'll see you in a bit. All right, so I have the engine fully wired now. Hopefully nothing is broken or bad. I double checked to make sure that none of the pins are touching each other. And yeah, so yeah, I mean, this is how it's gonna look. I'm gonna insulate this with some Kapton tape and also make sure that these don't touch anything, and I'm probably just gonna mount it like that on top of the speaker housing holder thing. I'm just gonna mount it right here, and then I'm just gonna close it up, and it should be fine. So that's how it looks. Let's put her on the track. All right, and this is the installation complete. So I actually had the light and the motor polarity correct in the first try, which is great. And this thing runs really nice. So first off, you can see the headlight. It is so much better than before now. There's a little bit of light bleed, which I'll have to fix by filling in the back of the headlight. But this bright headlight's so much nicer, and now the crew can actually see what's ahead of them, which is pretty cool. The rear light also still works. If I put it in reverse. And yeah, you can actually see how she sounds. Oh, wrong thing. Yeah, so she runs really nice now and sounds so much better. Again, I have to fix the light bleed in the back here. I didn't add Keep Alive in this engine because I didn't really feel like I needed it because it had so many pickups. But if I ever want to, I can always add more because this tender is so empty and inside. There's so much space inside, I can add whatever I want. Another thing was I used the stock 2 BLI speakers with no enclosure. They could sound better, but honestly, they sound good enough to me. I'm not really much of a, what do you call it? I'm not really too picky about sound, so they sound good enough to me. But that being said, that could be something that I improve in the future. It was just easier to reuse the stock speakers from the engine. But yeah, so this thing now looks great, sounds great, and the lights work so much better now. But yeah, that is pretty much it for this video. I hope this install tutorial guide sort of thing is helpful to someone out there. I'm sure people are trying to replace their old QSI decoders from the BLI engines. And so this should be a helpful guide for anyone who's trying to do that. And yeah, honestly, not a very scary install. I wouldn't recommend doing the hardwired 21-pin decoder. That being said, I would probably recommend starting out with like a 9-pin or 8-pin decoder to wire to. The 21 pins are really challenging. I would not recommend that for beginners. But that being said, it does save you a lot of money in the long run because 21-pin decoders are much cheaper than the rest. And so yeah, but that is pretty much it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope, again, this was helpful to someone out there. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Take care. Bye.